Product placement? What is that? Hey guys, welcome back to Tactically Misguided. My name is Patrick, as you all know. My colleague, my esteemed colleague,
Hunter Lobertini.
Alright guys, for this week's episode title, Muhammad grabbed the flamethrower. So, I mean, that should catch your fucking interest like right off the fucking bat. We're going to be kind of doing a little bit different this time. He's taking the floor with this one, and I'm going to be probing questions as we go along. Because, like we've mentioned before, he has weaponized autism. Makes for a great encyclopedia of knowledge about random shit. So, with that, let's talk about the Shatoy Ambush.
So the Shatoy Ambush.
Shatoy Ambush.
So we'll just run down like 5 W's real quick. The Shatoy Ambush took place during the First Chechen War in the middle of it, so 1996. The war started December 31st, 1994. Disastrous New Year's Eve attack on Grozny. Long story short,
Throwback to our New Year's episode.
You had the Russian Federation fighting the Chechen Republic, essentially. After the Soviet Union fell, a bunch of states broke away. Like you had Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, the Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Ukraine. Well, Chechnya wanted to do the same. The Russians said no. Long story short, Chechnya is an overwhelmingly majority Muslim country. And there's Sufi Islam, which is a breakaway of Sunni Islam. So this war, this ambush was precipitated by the Russians basically coming in and completely botching 3 attempts to take the capital of Grozny, which Grozny is the largest city and it's technically the only city in Chechnya. Shatoy is located south of that. Chechnya is mountainous. I mean mountainous. It puts the Kunar Hindu Kush mountains almost to shame because it has so much vegetation and it's just extremely difficult to get to. The natural barrier, like Islam kind of came there a little bit later in the game, and great empires like Persia and Russia, everybody struggled to take the Caucasus Mountains, which is where Chechnya is located. So it's above Georgia and Armenia and Azerbaijan, so it's sandwiched between Orthodox Christians and Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims and Orthodox Russians. So there's a melting pot of people there.
Melting pot of...
Dude, there's like 200 fucking languages in an area that's probably the size of Tennessee. Chechnya is the size of Connecticut. So that's for your frame of reference of how large this country is.
Damn.
Shatoy is located in the south, and it's I wouldn't call it a city. It's a town. It's a very large town. So where this happened was essentially a ravine with a river in it, and it was a perfect choke point. The 2 different sides, well, this is why it was such an important ambush, is because of how large the ambushed force was. It was an entire motorized rifle battalion. That's almost 300 dudes. And they were attacked by 43 Chechen rebels. Now, in the beginning of the war, Chechnya had a national guard. It was their armed forces, and they were all ex-Soviet guys. They all spoke Russian. They all served in the Russian army. A lot of them served in Afghanistan. But after those 3 attempts to take Grozny, thousands of these guys were dead. And so they needed fresh blood. So who answered the call but jihadists? And this is pre-9/11. So jihadists were, at this time, more like freedom fighters. Similar to like, yes, they were doing horrible shit like the IRA. They were doing terrorist
You said that wrong. IRS.
They were conducting terrorist activities, but the majority of their line of effort, their center of gravity, was insurgency, fighting. Now, it got pretty dark. There was some sieges that happened at hospitals and schools that were just completely subhuman, and they were terrible, and I don't condone that. But this was an insurgent force. It was an irregular force. It was a guerrilla force. So these guys, at this point in time in the Shatoy Ambush, are led by a guy named Ibn al-Khattab. And he's got like those fingerless black gloves that all Slavs love to wear. But this dude is apparently Saudi, and he was basically couch surfing in Afghanistan when this war kicked off. And he brought his expertise, and that's how he blew some fingers off. If you ever see him, he wears this sick, crazy Russian hat. What are they called? Ushankas. It's a Ushanka. They're like the big. You see him on Cossacks.
I was going to say, I love that you said that or asked that rhetorical question as if I would know what that was.
So guess what kind of hairstyle this dude had?
A fade?
Straight Jerry curls.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Not even a beret and Jerry curls. He was a Wahhabist, a fundamental practicer of Sunni Islam. He was actually a really good commander. He was also a very horrible human being. The guys that were under him were a mix of jihadists that were mostly from that area. And most of the information we got from this is actually from a Polish volunteer, a convert to Islam. He was Polish, white dude. Also, if you don't know this, Caucasians come from the Caucasus Mountains. That's where the term Caucasian comes from. Like, I'm white, but I'm not from the Caucasus Mountains. These guys are the original OG, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me kind of people. They have a mentality that I kind of equate to somebody with the age-old adage of, I may not like that person or I may not agree with what they're saying, but that guy right there, fuck that guy. So that's essentially what it came down to. So Ibn al-Khattab had moved from he never actually kind of went into Grozny. He was in the southern mountain range running these hit and run attacks. And what happened was in 1996 in the morning, a Russian battalion was moving along this ravine, and this was basically a linear point ambush.
Yeah.
They set up an IED in the front to kill the front vehicle, and then they hit the back vehicle with RPGs, and then proceeded to...
And trapped everyone in between.
See,
genius.
In the U.S., we have things like short count, we have logger sights, we have bump plans. This is the problem with the Russian military at the time, is they had 99% of their dudes were conscripts. Like, shaved head. They don't, like, their boot camp isn't like our boot camp. And their military structure, you can't even really, it's not even comparable.
I was about to say, that's one thing that we've definitely learned from this fucking war going on in the Ukraine. And I mentioned it before too with that, is the fact that one of the biggest things we have is small unit leadership.
Yes.
They don't fucking have that shit. So you have corruption everywhere throughout their military, from the fucking bottom ass man
all the way
to
up.
your fucking PFC fuckface, through Lance Corporal Schmuckatelli, through fucking all the way to the top.
Their basic version of their Secretary of Defense, General Shoigu, has an $18 million mansion. He makes maybe $120,000 a year. It's systemic, endemic corruption at every level in the Russian military. And this is post-Soviet Union. At least when they were in Afghanistan, they had a semblance of a cohesive military. But there were dudes from everywhere.
Yeah.
That shit fell, and they had a giant recession, and it affected the military, and they were just wholeheartedly unprepared for a war. And the people they were going up against are not your average people. Like, if you were to invade New Hampshire or Vermont, you may have a small group of people that would resist. If you invade Texas or you invade Alabama, what do you think is going to happen? Everybody's going to grab their gun.
Shit kicked in.
Well, and they're going to do the age-old adage. I may not like that guy or that guy, but fuck that guy. And they're going to pick up their guns. And this is kind of what happened.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Well, the problem is the Russians were very indiscriminate in their use of force, and they carpet bombed things. They killed more Russian civilians that lived in Chechnya than they killed Chechen fighters. They killed like 1/10 of the population when you look at it. There's about 1 million Chechens at the time, like 1.3 million Chechens at the time of this war. They killed thousands, tens of thousands. For Grozny, it was 50,000 civilians alone. They were carpet bombing entire cities. To us, that's
fucking...
You won't do that. You'll
No.
turn the populace against you and get a Shatoy Ambush.
Exactly. You would have your entire fucking... Well, one, if we did do that, you wouldn't fucking hear about it on the news because media is so fucking one-sided anyways that half the populace wouldn't know about it unless they fucking somehow know about it.
We did firebomb Tokyo and killed 250,000 people, and then we firebombed Dresden and we killed 300,000.
Are you talking about
World War II?
Well, yeah, that was World War II.
Yeah, but we're talking about modern age warfare. No, CivCaz is unacceptable, and even the most stupidest, bloodthirsty American commander is not going to allow it to happen. But I'll just read the background real quick. 43 Chechens under Ibn al-Khattab, professional jihadists, ambushed a Russian mechanized motor rifle battalion and literally wiped them out. They hit them at the right place, right time, in the right sequence with the right weapons. Russians got slaughtered, and there is a video of it, and it's bad. It's real bad. Those are the 2 hyperlinks I sent you. And
which, at the end of this video, I'm going to link those hyperlinks into the description when I post the video. So you guys can check it out for yourself.
It pretty much includes the Russians just killing these guys, stealing their shit, and executing shell-shocked Russians. I mean, it was fucking brutal. This was a post-Grozny coin operation, so the Russians had pushed into the south to try and like hem them up in the mountains, like bottle them up. All this did was, it's like trying to punch a hornet's nest with your dick. Like it's not going to end well for you or your dick.
Helicopter that shit.
And they had a lack of financial backing for the guerrillas, so that's why they kind of turned towards the more extreme Islamic jihad, because they could get funding from other countries. Because they had seen in Bosnia, which is a Muslim majority country, fighting against Serbia, that if they embrace this Salafist, Wahhabist type of Islam, they would get financial and tactical experts to come over. And there's a lot of funding that goes into these things. So we'll talk about the forces. 2nd Battalion, 245th Russian motorized rifle battalion. It was Soviet-style leadership, like he was talking about.
Yep.
They use a warrant officer in a weird NCO role. They don't have NCOs. Like, yeah, somebody's promoted to sergeant, but
they don't have They don't have NCOs. They don't have staff NCOs.
No, they had commissioned officers and then warrant officers that act like a corporal or a sergeant. And then you had contract. They were
well, that's degrading to you warrant officers.
They had conscripts. Now, they had what were called contract Nikki, which is contracted soldiers. So guys that get drafted and they decided to stay in. The only people doing that job were total psycho sociopaths. They were insane. These were criminals that couldn't make it on the outside that stayed in. Believe it or not, it was almost like gangs. Like the contract Nickies and the conscripts, they'd fucking kill each other. They'd get into gunfights. There's a recorded 6-hour gunfight between 2 units in Grozny while they were supposed to be going to a train station to rescue. If we should do an episode on Grozny, because we could do a 3-parter on that easy, on how bad they fucked up. And there's only a couple podcasts that have done that. But sorry.
So we could do that.
We could.
We could do that. We can be one of the few.
The Russians, they took an absolute shit kicking, and the terrain that we're talking about was a ravine with canalization. There was a stream on one side, and then on the other side was the ambush site, which was at elevation. The ambush tactics, they basically used IEDs with coordinated RPG and RPO fire. RPG is a anti-tank rocket propelled grenade.
Yep.
It uses the Monroe effect. It's a shape charge essentially on the end of a grenade launched by a rocket.
Yep.
RPO is a fucking thermobaric rocket that just kind of melts infantry that are mounted on the top of vehicles to the top of the vehicle.
Ooh.
It's gruesome.
Damn.
And a lot of us have the ability to go places in the U.S. military, get in a Humvee or jump out of a plane. For the Russians, they didn't want to walk anywhere, so they'd pile on top of these APCs. And in the video, at the very beginning, you'll see a column of guys just sitting up there, and they're thinking they're going from point A to point B. They didn't think about immediate action drills. They didn't have SOPs. They were all just kind of hanging out, smoking, hanging out on the top of these vehicles.
Fucking smoking and joking.
Smoking and joking.
Complacent as fuck. Complacency kills.
Well,
that being said, though, what did we also do during like World War II and shit?
We rode on the top of fucking Shermans.
Yeah, we rode on the, and we would use
learned our lesson.
We would use fucking Shermans and stack behind these motherfuckers. And that's one thing being a tracker that I learned, and it's the same concept with tanks too. You don't want fucking infantry around your goddamn vehicle.
No, they get run over.
You're gonna fucking run their ass over. You're gonna clip them with the back of the track when you're pivoting and fucking nail them, and they become fucking mincemeat, ground beef.
So
for spaghetti later.
How many Chechens do you think died in this ambush?
All right, if I had to guess, out of the 43, 20.
Three.
Three? That was actually my next guess.
You know how many of them were killed by friendly fire?
Three.
They had six wounded. There were several civilians. It didn't give a number. Some civilians were traveling with the convoy of Russians. Some civilians were killed. I don't exactly know what they were. They may have been like local leadership or local whatever. But how many Russians do you think died?
All right, so what we said 300.
There was over 300.
Over 300.
Over 300.
260.
233.
I've been close every time.
But only 53 wounded. Now, in most situations, the wounded are at the same, if not more, than the dead.
Yeah.
So why do we think there were so few wounded guys?
Because they were probably killed by their own guys.
They were executed.
Yeah.
It's on video.
I didn't want to say executed, but...
So a lot of the stuff that came out in the 1990s and 2000s was pre-9/11, pre-Al-Qaeda in Iraq, pre-Islamic State of Iraq. And it was funded and it was basically put out on the internet. And they were propaganda videos. And some of these are fucking brutal. Like heads getting chopped off, sawed off, shit like that. The Chechens started off with just regular propaganda of point ambushes, mine attacks, IED attacks, sniper attacks. And
so that is definitely a question I've got about this. IEDs, right? We knew nothing about IEDs until not even in the beginning of the war. Not even the beginning of Iraq. It was more towards, what, I'd say 2-3 years
after.
So probably like
2006, 2007.
Yeah, that's when IEDs started becoming more prevalent. And that's when we picked them up on our radar. So the fact that you mentioned IED attacks.
Well, the first IED attack, recorded IED attack, and some people will say, oh, it happened well prior to this. Well, we're talking what we know as an improvised explosive device being used in an irregular warfare manner actually happened in 1991. It happened in Somalia. It was right around the time of Black Hawk Down. I think it was afterwards. It was a unarmored Humvee IED attack. But they became more and more prevalent throughout warfare, but the Chechens standardized this. It was like they brought it into the norm of guerrilla tactics. Before this, it was mines. Like if you look at
and you said this happened what year?
1996.
This happened in 96.
This happened in 96. They were using IEDs from 1995 and 1996. It became standard practice.
Well, one thing that we've definitely seen, like previous to that time frame, obviously previous to the 90s, and just warfare in general, 9 times out of 10, guerrilla warfare is going to win.
Oh yeah.
All of these countries, including ourselves, are all fighting as a conventional force going against a fucking guerrilla force, and we get our asses handed to us every time, which is...
We were the guerrillas, if you remember when we first started out.
We were the guerrillas, and we fucking won. We are able to sit here and do this fucking podcast because...
We had a bunch of people that didn't want to pay taxes.
Yeah. Now look where we're at. We
still don't want to pay
fought
taxes.
over that shit, and... We're getting our asses raped over fucking taxes right now.
We both pay our taxes. We're not happy about it.
Oh, I'm definitely not happy about it.
We pay our taxes. So the IED became like a very prevalent tactic and technique with these insurgent groups. So what they did at this ambush site, they realized when they fought in Grozny that they could disable vehicles on either end, and it would create a choke point.
Yeah.
It would basically stop them. So... You want to know what they did?
What did they do?
They blew up the first vehicle with an IED. And then the slinky effect happened, and then they shot the last vehicle with an RPG. We know this because it's on video. So, massive fireball for this IED. It was big. Like, I don't know nobody has been able to discern what they used, but I'm pretty sure it was some sort of flammable material in conjunction with explosives that disabled the lead vehicle. Who was riding in the first vehicle?
Fucking,
the commander.
I was about to say, give me a sec. It's going to come to me.
The commander.
The commander.
So, do you usually have your platoon commander, company commander? Are they the first vehicle?
Fuck no.
Okay.
So, and the way that tracks rolled out, right? You got fucking 3 sections, first, second, and third. Third section has the platoon sergeant as track 12, which is the designated CASEVAC vehicle. The platoon commander is in first section, but he's track 4.
So you see how detailed he's been out. He is detailed with this. He understands exactly where everybody's supposed to be.
He
understands which vehicle has what person. And the
dying art of armored warfare, which we will talk about. I'm going to go on a slight of a tangent on that here in a minute.
But he has the details because in the United States military, if somebody goes down, you take their spot. In the Russian military, that's not how this happens. It's not how any of this works for them.
So they get taken out, and then what is it? Fucking chaos?
It was literally guys that were on top of the vehicles wound up getting roasted by these RPO launchers. And I mean, it was fucking nasty. Like an RPO launcher. So if you look at an RPO launcher, it looks like any other self-contained fucking rocket that you can fire. It looks like a law almost. It's a big fat law. But it's a thermobaric device. It was meant to be used against buildings. But they found that they could melt infantry to the top of tanks with an RPO launcher. They also had RPGs. So once they stopped, they couldn't go anywhere. They would either go into a stream, like an 80-foot drop into a ravine. They couldn't go up because that's where they would literally break their tracks if they tried to go up the mountain. There was no road. So they were fucked. So the guys that could got out and ran. Most of the trucks they were smart. The Chechens targeted the first vehicle with an IED. They targeted the last vehicle with an RPG. And then they did a basic on-the-fly picking which vehicle to hit with which weapon system. And they were smart about it. They took out the BMPs and they took out the tanks. There were I think a couple tanks with them. They took out the tanks with RPGs. They took out the BMPs with RPGs, and then they cut these. They're like the Russian version of a deuce and a half, like not a 7, smaller than a 7-ton, probably a 5-ton. They were taking them out with RPKs, PKMs. The PKP wasn't invented yet, but PKMs, RPKs, and RPDs, even dog bones, which is the AK 7.62x39 belted machine gun. You don't see them much anymore.
Wait, I thought that's what the RPK was.
The RPK is an extended AK. It's like their version of it's kind of weird. So
you can run that with a drum.
You can run it with a drum, or you can run it with a banana clip for the RPK. RPK is just a very long AK-47.
Yeah.
It's got a weird, thicker buttstock. They used it in sort of like an IAR role.
Yeah.
And then your RPD was like your SAW. And then the PKM was like their 240. Awesome sauce. So, we finished talking about what the Russian military was using for their weapon systems. And they have an organic weapon system that's on the BMPs, BRDMs, BTRs, whatever they were driving.
Yeah.
And it's nothing comparable to what our track vehicles are. They kind of sucked because even though they could traverse sideways, they could not, what's it called when you lift a barrel?
Elevation.
They couldn't get elevation.
Yeah.
Fucking no.
And with tracked vehicles, or with really any armored vehicle, there are limitations to your climb, right? So a track, for example, I could run up, and it was basically the way the hull was shaped too that would help with this, because you have the fucking where the bow plane and the fucking I could like run.
Break it down dumb for me. I could literally go up. Like put my vehicle
I could take
up.
a 90-degree wall.
Okay. And you could still, and so then you had more play.
So because the way the track is, so say I hit that wall, right? I would hit it, and the front of the vehicle would slide because of how it's angled. Would slide up, allowing the tracks to grab
and then
ratchet up because we have little fins on each track.
Is that like when you see Jeeps hit those 90-degree walls and just keep going? Like, it can like go straight up.
It's all about the fucking placement.
Do you think the Russians did that?
Probably.
Well, for this ambush?
Did they?
Fuck no. They stopped. The guys that could got the fuck out and ran. Most of them got shot in the back running away. They did not have plates. This was all soft armor. Russians had some what millimeter cannon do you think they had? I'm asking because I genuinely don't remember.
What was it?
20 mil or 30 mil?
What vehicle was it? A BMP?
They had they had BMPs and BTRs. They didn't have any BRDMs.
All right, it's been a while since I've done AFVID, but I think the BMP was smaller than the BTR, or the BTR was smaller than the BMP. BMP was tracked, BTR was wheeled. I think they had a fucking 50, maybe, like something to that equivalent of.
Yeah.
They didn't have anything. They didn't have any big guns. For example, like we would use that in AFVID as a constant, like that's gonna be our enemy, or fucking beat, which is completely stupid for the fact that I was doing that from 2012 to 2019, because who the fuck is running around BTRs and BMPs anymore? But so we could take them. I could take them with a 40 mic and a fucking 50 cal.
Yeah. So the Russians didn't have anything to fight back with for long distance for crew served. The guys that were on the Dashkas, on the 50 cals that they have, they're 12.7 by 109, I think. Might be wrong. They abandoned their position. So now your heavy machine guns are gone. So now you're stuck in, by the way,
you're
bottlenecked. Everybody stopped. You don't have your main guns. You don't have your heavy machine guns. Now all you have is what you have on you, a fighting load, and maybe some grenade launchers, the Vols, the 35 or 25 millimeters.
Yep.
UGL under the gun launchers, where they're like rat traps. You have to slide the grenade into the top of these things and then fire them. Horrible design. So we talked about what they had, and we talked a little bit about what the Chechens had. The Chechens literally had the element of surprise, and they had the violence of action on them. So what they did is they basically had formed a line, and it was a point ambush on a linear target. So it was literally a shooting gallery. If you did survive the initial attack, the RPGs, the RPOs, now you were getting hit by small arms fire. And you remember, I told you, the guys that were Chechen spoke Russian. So if you called for help from the convoy to your nearest base, and the Chechens have basically been trolling you on the comms, is that going to sow some doubt in your mind as to whether to send help or not?
Yeah, exactly, because they know that they know they speak the language, so they know help is coming, so they could set up possibly another ambush to do the same fucking thing.
And they did that. I really want to do Grozny, but when they did that in Grozny, they had entire rooms filled with Chechens that spoke fluent Russian, like better than most Russians. They were able to do all kinds of shit, like call off airstrikes, call off artillery strikes, sow confusion. So you don't have help coming because you're a battalion. You're a fucking battalion, and you're moving from point A to point B. Like if you send out a squad, you send out a platoon, a section, element, you'll have a QRF, at least in our minds,
as you're supposed to.
So let's nail it down so far. Lead vehicle with the commander's blown up. Rear vehicle's blown up. You have no heavy weapons. All your friends are just fucking roasted to the side of a vehicle. What do you think is going to happen next after they've completely wiped out their ability to withdraw?
Fight to the fucking death as much as you can.
Or go fetal and get fucking executed, which is what mostly happened. It was again,
so they didn't fight. They gave the fuck up.
There were a couple of guys.
Which doesn't matter if they would have gave up or not, because they would have fucking died anyway.
The Polish volunteer basically said a bunch of stuff, but again, this is all on video. And it's gruesome. Guys were basically, that weren't killed in the vehicles, because in the video you'll see them opening these doors on the trucks, their logistics trucks, and pulling corpses out. You'll see bodies on the side of the road that are completely mangled and still like smoldering. Like they'd roll them over and you'd see all the heat come off. It was pretty cold when they did this battle. All the Chechens basically, once they had destroyed all the vehicles or immobilized all the vehicles, then pinned them down with PKM fire. They pinned them down with belt-fed weapons. And then they started moving from the south position and clearing north. So they didn't do a line advance, which is smart because they could still hold down the center and the front of the convoy while they're
moving through.
Moved up and created. So then
you have 2 points of friction.
Yeah, and it's basically you're starting to create an L shape. So then they set up machine guns, and anybody that did make it down the ravine to the stream was getting shot by PKM, and they had enfilade fire up the axis of the convoy. So if you did manage to survive, the only place that you're going to be able to hide is in nowhere. In front of the vehicle, side of the vehicle, under the vehicle. Guys did try to hide. There's a video of Ibn al-Khattab actually. These guys were coming up and it was kind of like a moto video. They were sitting there recording each other and then literally one of them goes, "What the fuck is that?" And there's a Russian that's bleeding out of his ears and he's like stumbling and he's hiding behind a tree. Some guys tried to hide behind trees. And then like 3 or 4 of these guys did this. And they would walk up and literally take their gun off them. And the guys that couldn't walk under their own power were literally laid on the ground and there's a video of Ibn al-Khattab mag dumping an entire AK into one of these dudes. They did take a couple people prisoner. It's very grim on what probably happened to them. They probably got executed. But so they had no hope of QRF. Again, these are contract soldiers or conscripted soldiers that had no idea how to do tactics. So if you took out the main guy and you gave him no route to escape, and they weren't smart enough or had the intestinal fortitude to make a stand, they all got slaughtered. In the videos, it shows snippets of this, but that Polish volunteer actually did an interview at some point, and he was a Polish convert to Islam. And as the war devolved into more gruesome, evil things that happened on both sides, like the Russians massacred thousands of Chechens. They went in entire villages and killed anybody over the age of 11.
Now, did they do this before or after this?
Both.
So to the Chech, it's fucking.
You're killing all the women and children too. They were carpet bombed.
To them, it's fucking revenge.
So looking at their mindset, the Russians were there because they had to be. If they left, they'd go to jail or get shot by their own commanders. The Chechens were there on their own free will, their own fruition. They were fighting for what was theirs. Now, you killed all the guys that were in the National Guard that actually had some semblance of honor and duty. Now you have half of these guys at least are whacked out jihadists. So the Russians created this animal. By doing everything they did, carpet bombing the cities, killing any male over the age of 11, there was mass rape, there was mass murder, there was internment camps. It was savage. So for me, I don't know. I'm kind of pulling for the Chechens to win, but I'm not necessarily saying that I like every single one of their fighters. If you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, like
I'm not going to endorse jihadists whatsoever.
Liking their tactics. I mean, let's take that completely out of the fact and just put in like a empire, if you will, Star Wars reference, coming through, and
it's a trap.
It's a trap.
It's a trap.
Fucking massacring your fucking people, like going through fucking trying to overtake countries and shit, and like killing women and children, and then you have
they're not even
the freedom fighters.
They're not even the same ethnicity or religion. That too. All these Russians are either atheists, maybe a small minority are Orthodox, but these are devout Muslims. And they just, honestly, they just want to be left the fuck alone. They want to have their own country.
Well, and that's what happens with this shit. You have somebody that thinks they have too much power, and then they try to go in and they try to fucking overtake other countries. And we saw the same concept throughout life, throughout our history, throughout the world's history of empires going through and trying to claim what they think they deserve or whatever the fuck else, and then the people of those states, those countries, or whatever else, fucking rise the fuck up against them. And yeah, you're right. They created that. Because that's what you do when you do that shit, is you create your own fucking enemy.
And they wound up basically, they did have some military experience, but these are not professional Western troops. They developed their TTPs, their SOPs, they developed everything basically on the fly. And that's why this ambush is important, because you can have the best equipment, you can have the best weapons, you can have the overwhelming force, but what you can't push is that drive and the mindset of somebody that is willing to die and kill. So you had a bunch of sheep mounted in these vehicles.
Compared to a bunch of fucking bloodthirsty wolves waiting to take your ass.
And it was, honestly, you could have put like some circus music to it, because after they killed all the Russians, they just stole all their shit. They just went to every body and stripped it of ammo. They took their boots. I mean, it's called battlefield recovery. It's a real thing. And like guerrilla units have been doing this forever. It's like you would see pictures of the VC in Vietnam with M16A1 rifles that they got off of the Arvin.
Yeah.
The M14s, even M1 Garands, grease guns. You take what you can get. I don't condone them executing prisoners, but they necessarily didn't have friendly lines. They didn't have the ability to house prisoners. So it kind of sucks, but like, you invaded a country and killed a lot of innocent people, and now you had to deal with the ramifications of that. If you killed all the just fighting aged men, and now you're getting the animals, be prepared to suffer the consequences. And the same thing can be said about the Russians in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Like, you blew up somebody's fucking home. You killed their kids. You killed their wife. What do you think is going to happen if you try to surrender?
Well, now there's not going to be any shortage of people waiting to fuck your ass up.
Yeah. So overall, the Shatoy Ambush was a giant black eye for the Russians. They tried to do a media blackout on it. It wasn't even acknowledged for many years. Some different reporting. There was a jihadist website called the Kavkaz Center, and they had a bunch of videos. None of them were like terrorist videos. They were ambush, guerrilla tactics. There was no like beheadings and shit like that.
Yeah.
But as it became more dire on the side of the Chechens, when they started running out of people and they could take who they could get, they were getting some real fucking animals. Like, there are some brutal videos out there that are like, this is where ISIS took their cues from. They watched this shit and literally 20 years later did the same thing.
Yep.
But
history repeats itself.
It does repeat itself. And we could talk about Grozny, and there's parallels. Like, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. But there's parallels to all this stuff. So.
Well, damn. I think that's going to about cover it for this one, guys. That being said, I think our next one's going to be on Grozny. Huh?
Grozny. It's brutal, and it's funny.
Or Grozny, not Grozny.
It's funny. It's slapstick humor on how you could take an entire city and then just lose it to a small amount of dudes. It's hilarious. The way the Russians reacted by shelling their own guys. It definitely is going to be not a multi-part, but a long episode. But Grozny, there's a Jocko Willink has something on it. Lions Led by Donkeys have something on it. There's a couple of British documentaries on it. I encourage you to look up these things, because whether you're somebody that is just pro Second Amendment or you're a member of the armed forces or law enforcement, there's lessons to be learned throughout all these things. And it's on both sides. Whether or not you're saying I'm here to prevent tyranny, or you're the person that says, hey, I'm the guy in charge of this. Maybe I shouldn't pull a Waco.
Exactly. And that's why we talk about these things too. Like I mentioned in the previous episode 13, about when we were talking about Waco, it's not like we're Monday night quarterbacking this shit.
I never played football.
I never did either. Believe it or not. But like, we're talking about these things years in the future, when hindsight is 20/20 on these things. And you can't ignore what happened and the fuck ups that happened during these events and expect to move forward as an effective law enforcement force or as an effective military force. You can't.
Yeah. Like,
So you have to look back on these things and critique them and think of where the fuck did I go wrong?
well, and that's why we have so many standards in the U.S. military. Like when you do a patrol, there's a format. When we have contact, there's immediate action drills, battle drills.
Exactly.
You have all these things like METTC, SMEAC, TTFAC-OR. There's all these acronyms, and you have individuals. Like, he literally remembers where every single person, leadership, and special equipment was located in his unit. That's important because if one person goes down, somebody else picks up the slack. And if you don't do that, you get a Shatoy.
You get a shouty.
A shouty.
All right, guys. With that, I think we're gonna conclude this episode for this time. This is actually not gonna be an hour-long one this time. The next one's gonna be 2 hours.
We didn't fuck up as much, so you don't have as much editing.
Yeah, true. We didn't have as much as our high school educations coming out. Mm-hmm. But I hope you guys like this video. Subscribe and like the channel. And any closing notes?
Post comments in the bottom. If we screwed something up, we know we're both fucked up all the time. But if you got proper information, throw it in the comments. If you want to hear something, see something, or know a little bit about something more, leave it in the comments. I'm not going to read them, but
I'll read them.
Yeah. So I don't have social media on my phone. That's why,
For good reason.
That's why I carry this thing around.
A tabaret.
A cabaret.
A cabaret.
Oh, the Chinese spy balloon.
Real quick.
Yeah, real quick.
Real quick.
Dude, you can put more sensitive stuff on balloons, but I personally think they were fucking around trying to find resources in the Arctic region. I think somebody somewhere fell asleep and that bitch drifted. Whoever it was, they probably have a bullet in the back of their head in China.
Yeah. Well, okay, we say that, but there's also one going over Venezuela and another one due to come here.
Resources. I think they're looking for resources, and I think somebody fucked up real bad because they have plenty of spy satellites. Although it was kind of humorous to see everybody out there like, take that balloon down. Bro, it's at like 33 to 40,000 feet. Like,
Wasn't it like 60?
it was something ridiculous. They just shot one down in Alaska today.
That's the one that was.
40,000.
That's the one that was supposed to come over.
At Fairbanks, Alaska, where we had the color system for flags on training during hot days. They have a moose warning system up there.
Yeah.
Like, you can't PT if there's been a moose sighting or some shit.
What the fuck?
Yeah, well, it's Fairbanks, Alaska. It's like dead smack center of Alaska. There's
Makes sense.
there's some crazy shit up there. But yeah,
I guess the mooses ain't very friendly.
the Mises.
The Mises.
But that's all I got. Throw stuff in the comments and just ask if you want to. If we get enough people to ask about a type of episode, we could probably do something like that too.
Fuck yeah.
And we're working on the live stream.
We're still working on that. It's coming. Mm-hmm. Just want to make sure all the ducks are in a row and all the chords work.
Dominion voting made our chords.
All right, guys. Everyone, I hope you have a good weekend. Probably going to throw this up in the early days of next week. And we're going to get to work next week again on our Grozny. Or Grozny. Episode.
Chechnya.
I love fucking all these names up.
It's a wild, bro. Yeah, we'll put the videos in there.
Yep.
One of the videos has more than just the ambush. You'll know the ambush because it's got like a real bad blue filter on it. But yeah.
Yeah, you can tell them apart.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Hope everyone has a safe, good weekend. And we'll see you next time.
See you guys.
Peace.